Throughout this year of modern world history, we have discussed political, economic, and cultural developments. In this video, I will be talking to you about 3 important inventions from the Industrial Revolution and how they impacted modern-day society. I will also be talking to you about the differences of World War I and World War II and how that impacted our society. Finally, I will be discussing 3 inventions from the 1950s on that are similar to inventions during the Industrial Revolution and how they impacted our society today. The first important invention in the Industrial Revolution that I will be talking to you about today is the typewriter. The typewriter was a mechanical device that allowed people during the Industrial Revolution to type printed characters on a piece of paper. The first typewriter was invented by William Austin Burt, Carlos Ghidin, Christopher Latham Sholes, and Samuel W. Sholl in 1878. Sholes was the primary creator of the typewriter. Sholl and Ghidin created the QWETY keyboard. The invention was created to decrease the time needed to do work. The typewriter provides a faster way to create more formal work. Before the typewriter was created, people had to handwrite everything, and now they have more efficient and faster way to do the same work. The typewriter was needed during the industrial age to supply an easier way to write books, letters, and also decrease the time secretaries would need to do to produce work. In addition, it allowed for neater writing than handwriting. The typewriter brings more money to people because they are producing the same amount of work in a faster rate. Furthermore, it allowed people to communicate faster than ever before. It also helped governments, businesses, and ordinary people. This invention also opened up more jobs for women as they can become secretaries. The typewriter paved the way for computers and technology that we use today. Moving on from the typewriter, the next important invention from the Industrial Revolution that I will be discussing is the telegraph. The telegraph was invented between 1830 and 1840 by Samuel Morse and several other inventors. He also invented Morse code, which was a series of dots and dashes to symbolize letters of the alphabet for easier and faster communication. The first telegraph message was sent by Morse in 1844 from Washington, D.C. to Maryland. The primary purpose of the telegraph was to revolutionize communication from long distances. There was eventually a telegraph line that stretched out across the Atlantic Ocean. It was called the transatlantic cable. The telegraph worked by transmitting electrical signals over wires that were laid between stations. The telegraph also allowed for faster communication with far places. It also helped with trade and deals with other countries. Take longer to hear back from places through mail instead of the telegraph. The telegraph ignited a search for an even easier and faster way for communication. Now we have the internet, email, text, phone, and many more ways to communicate with people around the world. Finally, the last important invention that I will be talking about to you today is the invention of gaslit lamps. Gaslit lamps were created during the Industrial Revolution because oil lamps were not effective and could not do all the things gaslit lamps can do. William Murdoch was the first to look for a new way to improve oil lamps. While experimenting with different types of gas in the Soho foundry, he found that coal gas is the most effective of them all. Murdoch started the gaslit lamp by lighting his own house using gaslit lamps in 1792. Eventually, he even lit up the outside of the Soho foundry in 1802. After seeing Murdoch's inventions at his home and work, many people began using his discovery everywhere. Eventually, streetlights were composed of gas instead of oil, and the first being in London in 1807. This led to Paris lighting all of their streets using gaslit lamps in 1820. The gas using gaslit lamps was natural coal gas. This gas was created by heating up coal on an oven with absolutely no exposure to oxygen to purify the gas. Then it was filtered and pressurized. Then the solution was sent through pipes to light various things such as houses, lights, and streets. Although gaslit lamps were way more effective than oil lamps, they had flaws. They had to be lit every afternoon and put out every morning, and if there was too much gas, they could explode. During the Industrial Revolution, because it produces cheap but effective public lighting, and it was way easier to light homes, streets, and allowed for large gas companies to start a large company. Without gaslit lamps, people would be stuck with defective oil lamps, and the evolution of the light would be set back. Gaslit lamps led the way for future lighting such as electric and solar lighting. After talking about inventions from the Industrial Revolution, we will be moving on to the differences between World War I and World War II. One important difference between World War I and World War II was the time frames of the war. World War I happened in 1914 and lasted until 1918, which is a total of 4 years. World War II happened in 1939 and ended in 1945, which is a total of 6 years. Another important difference is the parties that were involved in the wars. World War I was the Central Powers, including Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey, against the Allied powers, including France, Russia, Italy, Japan, and Britain. World War II was the Allied powers, France, China, and the Soviet Union, and the US, against the Axis powers, Germany, Japan, and Italy. Another significant difference between World War I and World War II were the deaths. World War I had close to 17 million deaths, 10 of which are military and 7 of which are civilian deaths. World War I also had 21 million wounded and about 7.7 million imprisoned. World War II had about 6 million deaths. Not all died from battle, but famine and war-related diseases. Another important difference between World War I and World War II was what caused the wars. World War I started due to the assassination of Archduke Francis Ferdinand of Austria. World War II started because of 4 major things: Hitler's rise to power, his alliances against the Soviets, the political issues in Germany, and the Treaty of Versailles. Another significant difference is the genocide target. World War I, the main source of genocide was against Armenians. In World War II, the main target of genocide was against the Jews. Another important difference between World War I and World War II was the presidents ruling the U.S. World War I was ruled by Woodrow Wilson, and World War II was FDR and Harry Truman. Another important difference between World War I and World War II were the types of weapons used. World War II, the weapons were far more advanced, such as the tanks, aircrafts, and guns. World War II also used nuclear weapons, which weren't in World War I. A main difference between the two wars was the end of the war. For World War I, the Central Powers lost to the Allied powers. As a result of the war, the Ottoman Empire was executed and no longer exists. In addition, the League of Nations was formed to prevent another war like this. For World War II, the Axis powers lost to the Allied powers, and as a result, the United Nations was formed to help international conflicts. The differences of these wars show how the wars evolved, and both tried to prevent wars in the future. After discussing the differences between World War I and World War II, we will explore inventions from beyond the 1950s that are similar to the Industrial Revolution inventions that have impacted our society today. The first invention I will be discussing is the computer. The first Apple computer was invented in 1973. It was also Apple's first product. It was known as the Apple I. It was designed and hand-built by Steve Wozniak. Steve Jobs, Wozniak's friend, had the idea of selling the computer. The first sale was at Homebrew Computer Club in Palo Alto, California. It sold for $666.66. They produced about 200 units. Unlike any other computer, Apple was the first fully assembled circuit board with about 30 chips. To complete the computer, users had to add a case, keyboard, power source, and display. This computer set Apple apart because it was the first to use a keyboard. Nowadays, Apple creates technological watches, iPhones, and high-tech computers. This invention has helped speed up the process for people to do work. It has also allowed Apple to grow as a company and create high-tech computers they do now today. I'm even filming this video off one of their latest computer models. Finally, this invention was also probably brought to us because of the early Industrial Revolution invention, the typewriter. After discussing the computer, the next invention we will be talking about is the means of communication, such as messages and emails. Ways of communication are very important to bring people together and allow people to stay in touch. Some useful ways of communication are text messages and emails. The Finnish engineer Matti Makkonen had the idea of creating text messages. The first text message was sent on December 3, 1992, but the invention was thought of 8 years prior. Text messaging allows for quick sending and quick responses. In addition, the email was created by Shiva Ayyadurai in 1974, who was 14 years old at the time. His work was unfortunately stolen from him by Ray Tomlinson, as he took credit for creating the email. Shiva began his work on the email system from the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. His goal was to emulate the paper-based interface mail system electronically. The email is very important and is often used in people's work and schools because it is an easy way of passing on work and information. These ways of communication were probably brought to us by the early Industrial Revolution invention of the telegraph because it allowed for communication back then. Finally, the last invention we will be talking about is the videotape recorder. Videotapes built the blockbuster empire. Charles Ginzburg was the inventor of the videotape. He invented the videotape recorder in 1951 at Ampex Corporation. The videotape works by taking live images from cameras and converting them into electrical impulses stored on magnetic tapes. He sold the first videotape recorder in 1956 for about $50,000. Eventually, in 1971, Sony started developing their first at-home VCR, which is a video cassette recorder similar to Charles Ginzburg's videotape recorder. This invention led to Netflix and Hulu and other platforms that we watch TV and movies on today. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you learned a lot about modern world history.